Hi, and welcome to Against the Grain. You know, each week as we gather together, we talk about different ways that we can live for Jesus, to live on purpose, and that means to live counterculturally, which is against the grain. And as we talk about this, we kind of talk about different seasons of life, and one of the seasons of life that we often think is one where we tend to drift towards the culture, we tend to follow the culture or conform to the culture, is that the young adult season of life, where, you know, when we're in our 20s, early 30s, where we are, we tend to think that is more of a conforming culture. But what we're seeing in so many young adults around us right now is a different way to live, a way to live counterculturally and to live against the grain. We're seeing so many of these young adults that are coming into our church that have just a zeal, that are living on purpose, that are living different than the culture, and that are want to make a difference in life. And we see this even in the data of young adults and how there's just a striving for purpose in this generation that is young adults now. And it's just been so fun as a church to we've seen so many young adults coming through our doors and being a part of our life, and to see how God is moving in this generation right now. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to anchor us in on 1 Timothy chapter 4. Paul writes this. He says, "Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity." And I think we've seen so many places where young adults are leading out in their faith and leading out in our church, which I love that. So before you go, oh, wait a second, I'm not a young adult, I'm going to tune out, I just want to encourage you that I guarantee you there's a young adult in your life. And I think this discussion will be really helpful for all of us as we interact with this next generation. So whether you're a parent of a young adult, or whether you are maybe a parent of a high schooler who's headed into this life stage, or you know a young adult, or maybe you are a young adult, I think this time will be really helpful as we really understand kind of what's happening in that generation right now. And with me, I'm really excited because I've got Evan Sandmann, and yes, that is his real last name, Sandmann, with me. Evan is our life groups minister, and he's also over our young adults here at 121. And then Michelle Baze is another one of our life group ministers, and her and her husband Kevin for years have been pouring into young adults as they are dating and getting married, and so she just has a great, unique perspective there, as well as being a parent of a young adult. So yes. I think this is a good dynamic. I think we'll have a lot of fun with this. So welcome. For both of y'all. All right, as we get going, I always like to start with kind of a fun question. So when we think about this young adult stage of life, Evan, you're in it. Michelle, you've been there.
Way past
I've been there. Yeah. What is what was your favorite part of being young adult?
Yeah, I think for me, there's just a lot of freedom in this season. There's not a ton of responsibility. So like, I don't have kids. I don't have a wife to worry about going home to, and all these other worries of life. There's a lot of freedom in this season where, you know, there's chances for new careers, new different things like this, meeting new people, all these things. It's just, the whole world's open to you, and it's a really cool season because you kind of get to explore a little bit, like, all right, like, who has God made me to be? What are the ways that He's wired me? What are things that I enjoy? What are ways that I can actually give back in society and do different things? So I think it's a really unique time. And then it's just really cool to be able to be like, all right, you know, if I want to take a trip somewhere with some of my friends, I can go do that. I don't have a ton of responsibilities. If I want to try a new hobby, I can go do that. The other day I tried a sprint triathlon with some of the young adults. Not sure like if that's going to be something I'll do like, frequently. My body's hurting from it a little bit. But yeah, there's just so many new opportunities that you can do and just explore.
Love that. How about you, Michelle?
Like over 25 years ago when I was in the adults.
When you were in this stage, what was your favorite part about it?
I just love, it was the first time I felt like I had some independence, and being able to explore that and just meet a whole different group of people, not in town, just go out and explore different areas of life and be a part of different communities that, you know, I didn't have the opportunity to through high school and living local. So it was just so much fun to connect and go do. That's awesome. And so that was so fun.
Yeah. I think I'm probably the same as y'all. I mean, this That was probably my favorite stage of life, and just because the possibilities are endless. I could do whatever I wanted to do. Just what does that look like? The world is my oyster, and before the reality of life really set in.
Yes, exactly.
So when we're talking about young adults, let's just define that real quickly. When I use that term, I'm typically talking about, and I think most people, there's different definitions, but 18 to maybe early 30s can be young adults. Is that mostly Gen Z? Is there maybe some millennial in there still? Do you know, Evan?
I do really poor job of keeping up with which generation's which.
Okay.
But
we'll just say it's kind of in that range, and it typically is either single or married, no kids. I think once you have kids, you officially leave. No matter how old you are, you leave that life stage because kids age you and take you out of that season of life pretty quickly. So, would y'all add anything to that definition, or would you say anything more about like who we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think this is we kind of defined it with the Vine ministry that we have is 18 to 34. In young adults, it's such a hard thing to nail down because it's such a transient period of life. So you can have a 25-year-old that is starting a new career, single, doesn't have a lot of responsibility. You can have a 25-year-old with 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah.
So it's different, it's transient. And then life stage just kind of comes alongside of where they at. And I think you define that well with single or young marrieds.
Yeah. And I think even within that, there's probably distinct life stages that, Michelle, I've talked about this a lot. There's the college age, right?
Yes.
Where you're kind of trying to figure that out. Then there's the kind of young professional where you're trying to figure out your career, what that looks like. And then generally there's the young married stage. So there's lots of different life stages there.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many different areas in the young adult range that they each have their own focus area, it seems like.
Yeah.
So,
different,
it's a broad range.
Different challenges, different everything. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those challenges and things. But let's first start off okay, as y'all work with young adults, y'all are meeting with them, working with them each and every day. What are some of the things that make you most excited about that generation and what's going on there?
I want to start with Michelle on this one because you have a unique perspective.
Okay, so my perspective, I love young adults. Didn't realize that was one of my giftings, but it ended up being from education and working with younger elementary kids, and then the Lord laying this on Kevin and I's heart to minister to young adults have been such a blessing for us. And so I'm coming from a perspective of like a mom of young adults, and then also from the biblical view of young adults, of just being able, they are so on fire. The kids I call them kids. I know they're young adults, so you'll hear me use kids a lot. That the kids are just on fire for the Lord. And they want community. They want to be a part. They want to go and make a difference.
Yeah.
And it's just so exciting to be able to walk with them and help guide them and to be there as a support and encouragement to them.
I love that. And I love seeing, because you are gifted in that. And I love how you and Kevin have, over and over again, not only have you mentored couples who are looking to get married, you've brought young adults into your house. They've stayed with you. Y'all have just poured, not just like meeting with them, but like shared your life with them. And that's really, really cool to see. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's a new stage we're in.
Yeah.
Like that didn't really happen until our kids were off at college. And I didn't like the term empty nesters.
Yeah.
And so, but we were never empty. So we still had our house with extra bedrooms, and the Lord just laid upon our heart that we've had people live with us in and out. And then even through mentoring people, needed a place to stay. And so, yes, I just love the way the Lord has used
your
that.
nest is never empty for sure. That's awesome.
Yes.
All right. How about you, Evan? What gets you excited about that?
Yeah, I honestly wanted Michelle to go first there because I was like, I'm a young adult still, so let's see what she likes about me and my generation. But yeah, no, I think the biggest thing that I am encouraged by is there's just a culture of like willingness, eagerness to learn. I think with a lot of the resources we have today, YouTube, all the different audiobooks, I look around a lot of my friends, and they are eagerly seeking and consuming a lot of content. And there's that word consuming that we can talk about in a lot of different ways. But then it's like, where do you funnel that learning?
Yeah.
Are we getting discipled by the culture, or are we getting discipled by the Lord? And that's really a really cool, unique perspective. So I think my generation has done a really, really good job of just that eagerness to learn. And there's just that hunger for that. So really excited about it. And just it's cool because it's a really formative time too. So it's the perfect time to do that.
Right. Yeah. I love that. And I love just seeing how they're just grasping. And I think there's just a hunger too for what Michelle has done with like, okay, who are some older people I can learn from? And we've certainly seen a lot of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the things that are exciting about that this generation. But you also kind of brought up there's also maybe some things that are challenges for this generation. So what are those kind of big challenges that young adults are facing now that y'all are seeing?
Yeah, I think a huge one is just this theme of waiting, constantly waiting either on the Lord or waiting on new jobs, a spouse, financials, a house. Like there's just constant like looking to the next thing. You get out of college, or if you didn't go to college, you're looking in this space where it's like, what's next? What's next? And you're comparing to all the other peers. They have a spouse, they have kids, they've got more money, they've paid off their student loan debt, they've done this, and it's just like I've got to get to this next. And sometimes we think in an instant gratification world that stuff will come quickly because we kind of have just our culture is, hey, we can look at this and it seems like, oh, they've got it. Or I look at social media and they're already there. They're going on these trips. And it's just like, how in the world I must be behind. So there's this waiting period that's like, when am I going to get this? When's the Lord going to bring that along? And that's just been a huge, huge wrestle that I have with conversations with a lot of young adults at 121. And it's pretty frequent. When you step into that, you can see a little angst. There's the uncertainty there. And that just seems to be a very, very prevalent one.
Yeah, I think, for a lot of people, that can be paralyzing, right? That can be like, oh, I'm just waiting here, and then I'll do that when I get to that next stage or whatever else. But what we see in Scripture is, no, we're called like this is a stage. The Timothy passage I read was young Timothy. Even though you're young, you still have a job to do, and God's using several of these young adults in a lot of things. I think singleness is a big one too. Oftentimes I'm single and I'm waiting to get married or whatever that looks like. And Paul had a lot to say in 1 Corinthians 7 about singleness is a good thing, right? Singleness is something is a period of time where you can actually be fully devoted to the Lord and to be used in that.
Yeah. And I think just like that, there's that theme, like something that helps me is Philippians 4, talking about contentment.
Yeah.
Paul talks about, I've found the secret to be content in all situations. And that's something I think as young adults, we can really, really struggle with because there are all those things that are vying for our attention. But what does it look like to actually rest and be content in where the Lord has you? And there's a lot of other biblical stories we can go into. Another great example of waiting is David. David, when he's 15 years old, Samuel comes and taps him on his shoulder, and he's like, hey, gives him the anointing. And then he has to wait. For how long? 15 years or something like that, right? Until he's 30. And we often look at it and it's like, we're in the middle of it. We're like, why isn't this coming along? Right? I'm 29. There's plenty of things in my life. I'm like, why hasn't this come along yet? But then you remind yourself like, well, waiting is actually an opportunity. Usually in the waiting, God gives us something to be learning. And then this is really, I love it because James 1:2-4 is one of my favorite passages. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of any kind, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so you may become mature and complete, lacking nothing. And it's in that waiting, in those trials, in that struggle where you might be looking around and thinking, I'm not quite there yet, which is the name of Mike Mobley's podcast, so a little plug there for him. But like, it's in that waiting that God often is revealing something in us and inviting us into a deeper relationship with him and learning contentment. And that's something that's really, really hard as a young adult. And it's kind of near and dear to my heart, one, for me personally, but then two, for all the interactions that we get to have. And I know, Michelle, you probably have a lot of conversations with people through that transition to, singleness, to dating, engaged, married. Like, I'd be curious to hear what you kind of have to say on some of that too.
I know that whole waiting thing is kind of new perspective for us, in the young adult married. It's different. What I mean is I've heard about the waiting, but even when my kids were in college and working with young adults, that waiting, every time that subject would come up, we would just try to turn around and but now, and just to turn their directions to what does God have for you now? And to be able to encourage them and find what is it. And so just spending time with the Lord and seeing where he's going to use you in this stage of life now. And then also with our marriage, with the waiting, of course, it's that anticipation of being married and just walking through the stage of engagement with them and seeing how special that is and how to pour into them and that they can enjoy that season
Right.
of not being married yet.
Right. Yeah.
And to enjoy that and see how the Lord is using them as now a couple, a non-married couple, to still go out and do his work.
Yeah.
And so we always try to kind of change that waiting because the Lord, you're right, Evan, has so much for you in these stages. You know, whether you're singleness or you're engaged or you're married. And also, you know, of course, in the young marrieds and the premarital part of it, it's that waiting to become one.
Yeah.
And so we really strive for that purity in the relationship and talk about that. And also, you said some of the challenges we see as young marrieds are coming in or engaged people. Finances is so heavy.
Yeah.
You know, because they have college debt, they beginning careers. You know, those kind of things is a challenge. I think social media is a challenge for our young adults, either in the single world or the engaged world, because everybody's posting, you know, how big the diamond is or
Right.
the house they bought before they're even engaged, and just that countering that.
Yeah.
That's not what God has for us.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it comes back to that contentment piece that,
Yes.
that Evan was talking about. And I think on the waiting too, I think what's interesting is, you know, we think this is unique to this stage of life, but in every stage of life, we're kind of always waiting for that next thing. That next stage will be better. When the kids leave the house now, it'll be, you know, all these kind of things. And in every stage, God has us in. He's preparing us for something, right? So that's no different than the young adult stage. He's preparing us. Think about David. And how God prepared him in that time period for, you know, to as he was wrestling lions, as he was growing closer to God. But at the same time, God has stuff for us to do in that time period. And every stage is the same. He's preparing us for the next. At the same time, we have something to do in that stage. So I love that.
yeah.
Okay, and then so a theme that's come up a few times here with the waiting and everything else is singleness. What Evan kind of talked a little bit about that. Like, what do you see and hear in the young adults about just that idea? Because I know there's always just this kind of like push of that, and you know the clock's ticking, and those kind of ideas. How do you help young adults just kind of be present in the current stage I'm in?
Yeah, and this is something that I constantly wrestle with myself.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where it's just like, all right, where does my attention go? I love Timothy Keller's book, Counterfeit Gods. It's idols often are good things that are made the ultimate thing. And that's how he defines an idol. And I think that's a really, really good definition, because when we think about singleness, what really is going on there is there's a desire to be married. That's a good desire. That's something that God has given. It's not a bad thing, but are we making it the ultimate thing? And oftentimes with our conversation and just in our hearts, like that can quickly become an idol. So what does it look like to wait on the Lord? What does it look like to prepare now? And then when the opportunity comes to continue to grow in that. So with that, I often think that singleness can become something that Satan uses as kind of just like a breeding ground for either bitterness or just an opportunity for him to get a foothold, to create a stronghold in our life, whether that's sexual immorality or running to other things or all of these things, just trying to expedite getting to somewhere that you want to get, as opposed to just waiting on the Lord in that. So really what it is trying to ask questions is a lot of the conversation that I'll have. And this is something I have to really do with myself because I'm single too. But asking a lot of questions to reveal, what is the core here? What do I think that this future relationship that I'm desiring is going to give me that I don't already have? Because is it a good thing? Absolutely. When you find somebody that is godly, that would be somebody that encourages you in your faith, that is a beautiful gift from God. That is something that we see in Scripture, that he who finds a wife finds a good thing, right? Like, okay, so we know that. But what if he hasn't given that yet? Yeah. Does that mean that I'm less than? No. We see Paul does incredible ministry as a single guy his entire life. He says he even wishes that some people would have the same conviction there as him. But he says if you're burning with desire, then go ahead and marry. We can get into that whole entire conversation. Which would be a different one. But like, there's that posture of just, all right, is this something that is going to give me ultimate joy? The answer is no. Is it a good gift? Yeah. So what does it look like just to be prepared and content in that situation, in that circumstance right now? And then just for me, it's really beneficial because I get to empathize with them. I'm in the same season.
Yeah.
So someone struggling through singleness or relationship, that's something I get to empathize with. And sometimes, candidly, I feel imposter syndrome on because I'm like I'm not married. I don't really know if I'm the one that's qualified to talk about this. But I think that's the beauty that sometimes God gives us those opportunities to be able to step in that space and empathize with whatever story He's given you. But yeah, that's something that I see as a common theme around singleness. Yeah, it's just a struggle. It's a struggle because that desire is there. There's a longing for it. And then it's just, all right, that is an opportunity to increase your faith and trust in God. That as I push deeper into it, if that's His will, He's going to bless that desire.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. But real quick, you're right. He's got a great podcast voice.
Yes, he does have a great. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm
it's
a nervous Nelly over here.
It's the radio voice.
I had to wear extra deodorant today just to talk on.
It's the radio voice. There's no face for. So if we can turn that camera off, then we're good.
I know. I don't
just
even
listen to
know
the voice,
camera.
and we're good.
Exactly. I want to go on a little different. I mean, with the singleness, but on the parent side. And so this is one thing that talking with young adults and walking with young adult women and even our own children, they love when we use them as examples. But so what happens is it's a generation thing too, right? So like my parents, the girls' grandparents, they were married at 20, 19, 20, so early on. And they don't realize we've moved past that, and it just happens that Kevin and I met early on in college, which is great. But the people that we are ministering to now, they're further down the 20 and 30 range, and they're not married, and that is okay. But I do feel like the kids, one of the things when we're walking with them, they feel pressure from the parents and the grandparents. Like, they come home for Christmas, and they're like, oh, who you're dating? Are you engaged yet?
Right.
And that is so much pressure on them. And I just would, encourage the parents to release that. Like, let the Lord use them where they are in their singleness and not rush that. He is going to provide that. He already knows, when that time is. But I do feel like, walking with the kids, these young adults, and even our own, that we would make sure we weren't catching ourselves of falling into that trap of, who are you dating? Are you going on any dates? Are you engaged yet? When's that ring coming?
Right.
Because that is unnecessary pressure, and it's not fair. That is not.
It's so funny because Kathy has an aunt who every holiday will ask our kids, okay, so who are you dating? And it was just like, stop it.
Yeah.
Like, that's not where their value is found in who they're dating.
Exactly.
They're an individual, and they are valued and great on their own. And it's funny. That's a great point.
Yeah, and their identity's in Christ,
Yes.
and He's providing that for them. And so,
and they're just kids, right, Michelle? They're just kids.
They're just grown-up
You keep
kids.
calling me a kid. And I'm like, when am I going to
told
finally
you.
grow up?
I know. Y'all are always going to be kids. I'm so sorry.
I'm going to grow up one day. I'm just looking forward to it.
It's
We're
funny
all
that
waiting for that.
Here's a funny story. So we were getting, Kendall and Connor were getting construction on the house, and then we've also used this handyman with some other young adults in the group. We're like, oh, he's great. So Kevin is helping, and he's like, yeah, my kids. And then we're at another young couple's house. He goes, yeah, our kids. And one time Kevin wasn't there, and the guy was there repairing. He goes, so is he the dad of all these kids? And we're like, no, sorry. Like, it was so confusing that, we just have all these kids. And so
it's okay. I mean, she treats me the same way because like at Christmas time when my neck was hurting, she sent me home from church. She's like, no,
That's true.
So she's all of our mom.
Yeah.
Okay, one other challenge that Evan, you and I were talking about earlier too is the challenge of community in this stage of life. Talk about that. Why is that such a challenge?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. There's such a natural built-in community as you're growing up, whether it is if you grew up in a church, there's youth groups, there's student ministries, there's different things like this. You go into college, you have all your college friends. If you're part of a school club or athletics, like you've just got this built-in community that's so natural. And then when you become a young adult, you pick a job, and then all of a sudden everyone goes their separate ways, and you're like, now what? Some people are lucky. Like for me, I had a great community all throughout my early and mid-20s. But even then, at some point, it starts to shift because people start to get married, they start moving, jobs change, they'll start doing all these different things. And without fail, at some point, for the most part, if you don't seek this out, you can find yourself on an island, isolated, lonely, really, really quick, which is it's a massive struggle for young adults. So that community portion, I would just continually, I've got such a heart for it because it's something that I've gone through in some way, shape, or form too, but just where do we find that community? Where are we going? Because there's so many things that are vying for our attention, and it's really, really cool to see in young adults that there's a lot more movement to be seeking out churches, to be seeking out biblical community. Because the other options sometimes just aren't the best. Whether it is all the other things in the world that we can go try to find community at and try to find people at, that would be the crowd that we want to run with, might not be the best. Now, it's not saying don't go out and like meet these people in some other ways, but I really think that there's a unique opportunity to be found at the church where we can find biblical community. And then I love what our young adults do with that. I think there's several groups that come to mind, life groups that we have here. Like great example is the Air Bar Young Adults group. They do a fantastic job of throwing together all of these different opportunities to either go out in the city with the lost, doing different things in community, whether it's pickleball, a bike club, game nights, all of these different things. And they're just doing life together outside of just a service on Sunday and then going about their lives and then be like, I can't wait to see them again next Sunday. So that community portion, just coming back around, there's just a gaping hole sometimes, I feel, for people that are just craving that, because God has built us for community. We're not meant to be on an island. And oftentimes it's really, really intimidating when they first step foot into a church. If they actually do, that's probably the most like exposing place to be. And I just love the heart of some of our young adults here that will recognize it, quickly invite them in and get them connected in a lot of different ways. And that's something Michelle could probably talk on because she's the connections queen of 121. If you've walked through the doors at 121, you know Michelle Baze because she's probably grabbed you in the hand and brought you to whatever you said your interest was. So
I try.
You do, and you do it 100%.
I agree. I agree with what you said, Evan, that our church does a great job of providing community for young adults, even life groups that are for college-age kids. And then we have life groups for just out of college, and then, the single adults and the married adults. They do such a great job. But also, I would like to encourage the parents, as you're going off to the college visits, like one thing Kevin and I did is, even though the girls they ended up going to 2 different states. The first thing, some of the questions we asked on the college visits are, hey, what are some of your, Christian clubs on the campus? Where are your FCAs? Where's your athletes in actions? What are the churches people go? And so we took all that information, not we, as in Kevin and I, we equipped our girls to start asking those questions when they're on college visits. So when they're looking at colleges, what does their Christian community look like? What are the opportunities there? So I would encourage on that search of community going into college that you start looking at those.
Yeah. I think one other thing with young adults too, because I've seen this in my own kids, I think oftentimes when we go looking for community, we're finding, okay, what is the community that's going to fulfill me the most, and usually for young singles, it's like the opposite sex and where am I going to meet someone? But I think rather than going in with that mindset, if you go in with the mindset of, okay, I want to go be a friend, and not worry about it and just kind of see how that develops naturally. I think that's just an easier way to make community. I think our groups have done a great job of that, of like not trying to look for the group I want to be a part of, but just, okay, here's a group, let me just be a part of it and see if that blossoms into friendships. And it's developed some deep friendships.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple different things that funnel off that, right? And the passage I always think of when it comes to community is Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. And let us... oh my goodness, I'm blanking on it now. Podcast. The lights are too bright.
Yeah.
And let us
not neglect. Yeah.
Oh, you get the ESV version. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up on meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, and encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. I think I botched that, paraphrased it. I'll commit it to memory later. We'll maybe have to cut that. No, I'm just kidding.
You're good.
But
we got the idea.
All of that, like I think of that, and you see this posture of, hey, community is needed. Without it, and there's even this habit right there. It says in the middle, and let us not give up on meeting together. It shows that we have a natural posture to kind of want to separate from that. So I would just encourage young adults, if you're looking for community, don't give up the fight in that. Continue to fight for it. Continue to dive into that. And then the other thing is communities change. I think a lot of us in college are moving out into the new phase. You might have had a great community before and all of a sudden it dissipates. Your next community might not look the exact same, but just to accept whatever God's given you and just push into that. It might not look like the exact group of people that you want to be with, but you might find that, and I love Mark Batterson. Mark Batterson has a quote that really, he's an author and a pastor in DC. He has a quote that really has just like been on my heart for the last 5 to 10 years. And he says, anytime you meet somebody, assume 2 things. 1, that you have no idea what they're going through. And 2, that they have something to teach you that you know nothing about. And I thought that's a great posture of humility, because if I could step into community and saying, this person's not necessarily like me, or this might not necessarily be the person that I might run with or feel like I really gel with, well, they've got a story that God's given them and a story of God's grace in their lives that you might be able to learn something from and actually really deeply appreciate that person and come into brotherhood or sisterhood or just deeper fellowship with, and just to roll with that. They are made in God's image too, and so are you. And it's kind of almost a posture of, who are you to really judge and just try to pick all these different things like this is like a dating app for friends, essentially, in real life. Like, where it's not just, nope, swipe left on this person, swipe right on this person as friends. No, God's given you that. What does it look like just to step into that space and care for that person well and love them well and learn more about them? And you might find that relationship and that community grows. Yeah. So I would challenge young adults, continually fight for that community, because it's so easy to go into a church one time, meet maybe one person, be like, that person wasn't me. I don't know if that's really like the church for me. Now just stick around and fight for it and just see what God does.
I love that.
Yeah. And I just love these young adult age. They're coming into the church and they're wanting community. Like, that is the first thing. And they are so confident and bold coming in. And some of them you can see walking through the front door, they're brand new, and they just come straight to new here and they just want to be connected. And so I just love that about their heart. And I love that there's so many options of different groups for them to be a part of.
Love that.
These kids nowadays are just so good.
They are so good.
Such good kids. You guys did a great job parenting.
Must be the parenting. It was so good.
Okay, so as we look at some of the research on this generation who is now young adults, one of the things we see is that they highly value authenticity. Like, that's a big value for them. So there's some really good things about that, some healthy things, and then there's some maybe some challenges with that. What are some of the healthier challenging things with that particular part of being a young adult?
I think one of the healthy parts is just being transparent and vulnerable. And so I think when they find community and that they feel safe in, and they can be authentic in, that they can just be who God created them to be. And so they can be transparent, they can be vulnerable, they can serve well in those. I think some of the dangers is sometimes they'll use like the new phrase of, well, my truth is. Yeah. I think that's a dangerous thing, because then they use that as persuasion or a manipulative platform. And so they have to be really careful about, what they're considering of being truly authentic or not.
I think you're right in that. I think, one thing, and this, by the way, this isn't just young adults. This is a lot of people in our culture today. Trevin wrote a book called Rethink Yourself. And by the way, I'd highly recommend it, especially for a young adult. It's a really accessible book written to whether you're a believer or not believer. But he talks about how it used to be, and historically, people would, to find out who they are, their true identity, they would look up. And then they would, to see what God says, then they would look around them to see, okay, what are other people saying about me? And then they look inside. And that today it's flipped. And so we see so many people who look inside and say, this is how I feel. So that must be what's most real about me. Then they look around and see who's affirming that, right? And that's my crowd, not anybody who pushes against that, no way. And then they look up and they kind of make God in their own image then, and based on, okay, whatever I feel, that must be who God is. And that can be really dangerous. Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah, and going along with the feeling, oftentimes my feelings aren't first aligned with the actual truth of the Bible. So it's a really good check, right? Because when it comes to my truth or all of these different things, or when we think about feeling, if you're talking about the vertical to horizontal, if I'm going horizontal first or really interior first, that's subjectivism. And subjectivism is simply putting like my feelings over God's truth. And that is a simple, easy way to stray really quick in your faith, because my feelings oftentimes are not right. They are not truth. I actually have to conform my feelings and emotion into God's image. And that's the process of sanctification. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's like, all right, this feeling that I'm feeling is real. David has feelings all the time in the Psalms, and you see him, and he just pours his heart out to the Lord. But he always goes back to God's character and his truth, and that's something that's a great posture for us as young adults and anybody to be practicing. And when we think about the authenticity, I think it's really just, what is that defined as? Yeah. Obviously, one of our core values in the church is authenticity in relationships. I think it's awesome because we can actually step in, be vulnerable, and understand where people are, and that creates an opportunity to pray for. That creates an opportunity of humility where I think we can actually be transformed by the renewing of our hearts and our mind. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So when we have a perspective of what authenticity truly is, which is, hey, being vulnerable with the things that is going on in your life and allowing people to step into that space, I think it's beautiful. But when it comes into the subjectivism or my truth or all of these things, and it's really setting itself up against an argument against God, that's a really dangerous place to be because we can quickly fall into all of these other things. So, yeah, I don't really know quite all of the answers there, but that's what comes to mind when I think of it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So another thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say also with that piece, one of the good that can come out of there, our story is our story because that is what we've been brought through. And so once we can lay down those walls and be just transparent, then we can meet people where they are and say, hey, I struggled with that too. Or, hey, I went through this. And then we are able to walk along other brothers and sisters in Christ without judgment. Yeah. And I think that is a really positive thing with it.
For sure, yeah. Okay, another thing we see in the data is that there is a priority on happiness, stability, and health. So what's healthy about that, and then what might be dangerous about that?
The first thing that comes to mind with this is happiness is an emotion, and emotions are never felt 100% of the time. Like I can feel happy in a moment, but it's not just like a lasting 100% deep-rooted, what we would define as joy. Like joy and happiness are two different things. Like, and I've already quoted James 1:2-4, where it says, consider it pure joy when you're facing trials. I'm not happy when I'm in a trial, right? But I could still have joy in that. So when I think of happiness, and this is where I think culture really has like bits and truths of different things, but they're pulling it from the gospel and then just really dislineating that. If that's a word, I don't even know if
I don't know. I thought Michelle was going to make up a bunch of words. I didn't know you were going to make words. Yeah.
Is that a word? We'll have to check that.
We'll have to fact check.
We'll have to
fact check there.
Disassociating, disconstructing that or deconstructing that and putting into their own terms, that's actually not really truth. Yeah. So when I think of happiness, like honestly, you'll hear things like the pursuit of happiness or all this. Well, there should be a pursuit of joy, and that pursuit is in Jesus. Right. That when we have Jesus and we have the Holy Spirit, there's a lasting joy. If I'm trying to find happiness in everything else, like if I can go to Ecclesiastes right now, it's like, hey, I pursued this. I pursued pleasures. I pursued money. I pursued comfort. I pursued all these things. It was all meaningless. And he just concludes it by saying, like, just enjoy the lot you've been given and whatever God's blessed you with. So when I think of happiness, oftentimes we define this as, oh yeah, like I'm just trying to chase this lasting just happiness, or whether I find that in my PTO time or a job that's like less hours of work, or trying to craft together this perfect life. I guarantee you, I've tried it. You can try to practice or like piece together this perfect life and these ideal things. You're going to get it and you're going to be dissatisfied. Yeah. Because it's not where true joy is found. So when I think of happiness, like there's a danger there, because if we are seeking happiness, of course we're going to be disappointed. That's the only option. That's the only outcome. You might feel it like joy for a little bit, but it's just masked because you're just doing these things that you enjoy. And when you start to lose pleasure in that, it's gone. So where do you find that? Yeah. So yeah.
And it's funny, even hearing you talk about like the perfect job and the perfect everything else, and you mentioned PTO is like one of the key things in that. Like that never crossed my mind as far as what job I want, as far as how much time I get off or anything like that. It was all about the money and the all this kind of stuff. But I see in this generation that's a big deal. They want that work-life balance, that PTO, work from home, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a healthiness to that, right? Mm-hmm. And then probably some challenges that come with it too. Yeah,
totally. And the amount of times I have conversations with young adults and they're like, I'm just looking for a new job. I'm like, okay, what are you looking for? Something remote so I can travel.
Yeah,
awesome, great. Like that'd be great. Yeah, so like I can just be working on the beach with a coffee like all the time. Like that's going to be my life. I'll be true happy. That's not going to give you joy. In a great book, just a book recommendation, if you're around the career things and around happiness, Every Good Endeavor by Timothy Keller is a fantastic read that really transformed my mind around career and how God has uniquely gifted each individual with the skill sets that he has wired them for. And then instead of viewing of how much money can I get, what is the benefit and the pleasures that I can get, how much PTO can I have, what is like the perks of all these different things and all of this, instead of looking at things that way and just working, so I'm basically trying to get to a spot like I'm working so I don't have to work, and all these other things. God's created work. It's a good thing. What a sorry and sad existence it would be if I'm looking everything in my life to just set myself up for the weekend. That's sad.
Yeah.
And it's really just that if you're seeking happiness in that, you're not going to find, you're going to be more disappointed than anything. And trust me, I've done it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, in my generation, it was set yourself up for retirement, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen so many people who just like, if I could just get to retirement in there, and then they get there and it's dissatisfying, or their health goes, or whatever else. And it's like, I've done all this work for what? Yeah.
And just going on into that, and I would love to hear your perspectives on it, Michelle, because I'm kind of just stealing the mic right now.
No,
because this is a hot topic for me.
It is.
But,
I
like,
just totally agree with what you just said. Like the word happiness, I have mixed emotions about it now because I think it gets misused. I think there's so much blur in happiness, because joy, right? We find that joy of when we do things and the joy, but a lot of people don't understand that difference. And so also I think like it's so frustrating when you are on social media or whatever. It's like, whatever makes you happy. Like, like don't worry about anybody else. It's all about me. So I think that happiness sometimes can be selfishness.
Yeah. And the selfishness thing, I think, is really the core of a lot of this. Like if
Yes.
we're talking about happiness, stability, health, all those things aren't bad things. Again, going back to the Counterfeit God's book from Timothy Keller, a good thing made the ultimate thing. It's not bad. Like I can relate from personal experience. I had several like hidden idols that I just built up in my life that were seemingly built on good foundations. I want to set up myself financially with all these different things. So whenever I have a wife, that she doesn't have to work and I'll be able to pay off all this stuff. All good thoughts, but reeks of idolatry. In just the subtlest ways. It's a good thing made the ultimate thing that I put on the throne of my heart in front of God. And that's what I see a lot of young adults do today, including myself. And it's constantly, all right, taking these things to the Lord and trying to surrender that, and daily repent of those things and moving into that posture. But stability, and I think about that, like really what is at the core of that? Is it comfort? Is it something that, it's I'm chasing so I can basically be set and I won't have to have any needs? Well, we can find that in God. God is our stable foundation. If I find it in a job, if I find it in career, if I find it in a relationship, that stuff can be taken. And if that's your foundation, you're going to be crushed because it's going to be just completely shattered and you're going to have to rebuild.
One thing I find kind of ironic is, a lot of the data shows that this generation really does, want to serve and do kind of big things to change the world, right? Like that's kind of a big piece of it. But I think there's can be this tendency to, well, if it's not world changing, like reading a book to my lonely, widowed neighbor next door, well, that's not world changing. So I need to be a part of something bigger. And so, and by the way, this isn't just for this generation. This is all of us tend to do that. We want to change the world, but yet we're not willing to do the little things that actually are the things that will change the world over time. And,
Yeah. And it's such a hard thing because in college, I think we all just dream about getting this job. And I think my microphone's slipping down here. So
just shift it up.
Just talk into it. No. So I think there's this thing where it's like, all right, after I get out of college, I'm just going to land in this great career and just be a world changer, right? And I remember specifically, there was one job that I just did not enjoy. I worked in it for like 8 months. I was miserable every single day. And I was just choosing to be miserable. I was just waiting for the clock just to like get off every single day. And I was like, all right, I would still work hard and do the things that I needed to do, but I was just not happy, not joyful. And it wasn't until I actually started reading that book, by Timothy Keller, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I am completely missing the opportunity God has given me right now, to connect with my coworkers, to be able to share, to be able to step into that. So I might not be changing the world in terms of doing all of these different things, but I might be stepping into a relationship with people and have an opportunity right there where I have a captive audience to get to know them, to be able to step into hurts and to be able to point them to a Savior, because we're all broken people in need of the same Savior. And that Savior is not going to be found in anything in this world, whether it's happiness, stability, career, relationships. And that's just such a huge, huge struggle. And there's freedom. And I remember the last 2 months there, I actually started to like, all right, I'm just going to choose each day to have these conversations and just pray for opportunities specifically to be able to talk with my coworkers in this corporate setting. And when I started doing that, I was like, oh, wow, I'm actually starting to enjoy this a little more.
Yeah.
There's joy here because I'm actually living out what God has called me to in this moment. And instead of waiting for that next moment, what does it look like just to capitalize on the moment that you've been given today?
Yeah. And that is how changing the world is by wherever Jesus calls us to go to do one conversation at a time. That is how the world will be changed.
Yeah. Like David was a shepherd.
Yeah.
He won't probably like do all those things. I'm sure he had aspirations and desire, but then, 15 years later, he becomes a king. I'm not saying that everyone here is going to be the president of the United States, but like.
Yeah. And I think, listen to, some of those words like stability, health. One of the stories is when Kevin and I were married, started a young family, and a job loss.
Yeah.
The rug was ripped out, loss of house, loss of community, because even though we were believers, we got caught up in that work, making money. And so when that rug got ripped up from under us, I mean, it was devastating, but it wasn't devastation because we had the Lord.
Yeah.
And from there, we were able to rebuild on the foundation that was built from the beginning. And so I think it's one of those things that we have to remember with serving and those kind of things. It's the little things, because really the glory is for God, not ourselves. And I think sometimes people want that glory and that recognition when in return it is the Lord's. And so I think that's a really good perspective to be in.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about health, I think people always think about the outside, but we have to remember health is mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And so that is health. And a lot of times when people talk about health, they're like, just the outward, the physical.
I think that's one thing that this generation is really more in tune with than we
Right.
certainly
Yeah,
have been.
exactly.
I think that's a really healthy and good thing. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing we see in the research is there is just a spiritual openness among this generation, probably unlike any generation for quite a while. So where are y'all seeing that play out in conversations and what that looks like?
I think working with the young adults here at church, the spiritual openness is that younger generation turn around and pouring into the older generation, I say older, in their 20s, are pouring into the teens or the students and just seeing
What
the
is
way.
it? Are we kids or are we older?
I know, right? They're growing up. But it's one of those things like we see young adults coming in our elementary and creation land serving and pouring into them. And I just love that they love to serve together. I love that they do life together. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
I mean, they're wanting to give back. For the Lord, and to use their gifts to further His kingdom.
But you, Evan, you interact with a lot of young adults who might not be believers in Jesus, but what have you seen among just conversations as far as a spiritual openness?
I think that there is an awesome desire to find answers. And it's a really, really cool place to be. And I think when we think about spiritual openness, there's that longing, right? Like longing in our hearts, like God has put eternity on our hearts, right? So I think we see that in our conversations. I think we see that in a lot of interactions. I just love hearing a lot of the different things that the Lord's doing in young adults all across the country, whether it's athletes and these different universities. It just seems like there's things that are springing up all around, and where there's the genuine openness and God transforming awesome, like just in awesome ways, like the hearts of men and women, young men and women. And often too, that spiritual openness is so huge because if we're open, then that's really inviting us a spot where God's actually going to be able to move. God can move in any situation.
Right.
But when we have that open posture, that's all right, you're being willing, you can come and actually hear and to be able to receive God's word. So when I'm thinking through that, I love to see the questions. There's just a lot of hard questions that they're asking that I think a lot of times is really, really hard to dive into. But I would actually encourage that. Those hard questions, dig into those. There's plenty that I have, questions still to this day where I'm like, goodness, these are some really hard questions that I've got to continue to dive into because I don't know enough. I'll never know enough. That's part of the reason that we continue to walk and grow and sanctify in our time with the Lord. But I just love to see young adults' desire to learn, the amount of questions that they ask, there's a hunger, they're seeking. And I think it's just really cool because then everybody else, like in community, I've seen it in on our Thursday things, whether they're hanging out late or, in life groups where they're asking questions and they're staying together and asking the same things and being able to dive into it because they're learners, like I said earlier, they're looking for answers. They'll either go into, actually, if they're in the Word, they'll be looking in the Word, or they're starting to go to YouTube and they might actually be looking and finding some other influencers or different things that are preaching gospel in some way, shape, or form, or it can go the other direction too. But I'm really encouraged to see how much spiritual openness there is. I think God's moving in a lot of really cool ways.
And that should embolden us to be able to step into those conversations.
Totally.
Because they're open to them. So let's talk and have the conversation. And they may or may not end up following Jesus, but they're open to talking about it in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And can I encourage one thing too?
Yeah.
Just for anyone listening to this podcast, young adults would love other generations that have gone ahead of them to be able to come alongside and walk in some of those questions. Oftentimes, I think that there's a barrier where it feels uncomfortable or they're asking good questions that we might not know ourselves. But that is a huge, huge space to be able to share your experiences, to be able to walk alongside them in that moment and point them to truth as opposed to those horizontal things or falling into subjectivism. That is a massive, massive piece of low-hanging fruit that we have as the church to be able to step into. And I love the fact that we have a discipleship program and all these different things that are really, really cool just to create a multi-generational church as ways to feed our young adults. But I would challenge you, if you have a young adult in your life and you have either experienced something similar or just see something that they're struggling with and you have personal experiences and then backed with the Word of God, please step into that space and be able to have those conversations, because more often than not, they're seeking that and they're open to it. And that is just a huge opportunity. So I would encourage that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Last, I'm going to ask a different question to each of y'all as we kind of wrap up our time. So, Evan,
Okay.
high school senior, about to graduate, enter into the world of young adults. What advice would you give that person?
Yeah. The most practical advice I would give is immediately seek out biblical community. Whether that is you're going into college and you're looking for, like Michelle said, church groups, FCAs, all these different campus ministries. Get plugged in where you can find community right away, because you're going to start to look and smell like your community really quick. So if I go into college and I'm like, I kind of want to venture out into all these different things, there's so many options for you. I would say first get rooted and find a good church, find a good community that's biblical, and you'll find yourself getting more life from that than from all the other things in the world that would be able to. I just have seen so many friends that have done that well, and so many friends that have not done that well, and either come back to the Lord or don't in one way, shape, or form. And there's just a difference from being able to step in and get discipled or be in biblical community right away. So if you're a high school senior, I would say if you already know what college you're going to, start looking into that now. Have a plan before you get there, because as soon as you get there, there's going to be a million excuses not to do that, because there's going to be class, there's going to be these social events, there's going to be all of this, and it's going to fall through the cracks. And you might look up after 4 years being like, I wasted it.
Sure.
So I would just say, seek that out.
Yeah, whether you're going to college or not, I think just find that community.
Yeah.
And to all these things that we've talked about, if you're in that right community, the answers will be there, and you'll be able to figure out how to navigate all this other stuff if you get that part right.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Okay, Michelle, parents. If you could say one thing to parents of young adults, what would it be that would be you think was most helpful?
I think I have more than one thing, but one thing, you're not done parenting.
Yeah.
It just looks different. And so I think for the parents of young adults, you're still their parent. It just looks different. You become more of a guide, an encourager. And so that is one thing, but give them space, but don't disappear. So you've got to give them space, but you cannot disappear from them. You are their safe spot most of the time. And so I just think if you give them space, also set those expectations. I mean, you have raised them in your house all these years, and then you just can't throw them out without expectations. And so, like, moving forward, speaking of college, when our girls went to college, we set those expectations when they were still in the house of what that would look like. You know, whether it's keeping the grades up, you know, those kind of things. And if they didn't hit certain expectations, which were very reasonable, like passing your classes, going to class, that there would be a consequence, and that could be coming home and going to college from the house, which is great, or working from the house. But set expectations before, and still, I don't want to say track them, but just know what they're doing. A funny story is when the girls went off to college, they were in 2 separate states. We had one 10 hours away and one 4 hours away. Kevin was allowed to see location for emergencies, but I was not, because that wouldn't be healthy for me if I was sat there and trying to like be this hovering parent, helicoptering. Just, I had to give them space, but at least we made sure they were safe, giving them that space.
I think there's such a tension there. I think that is so hard to, because you're right. For a lot of people, the bigger temptation is to continue parenting them the same way we have.
Yeah.
And as they get older, and especially as they get into young adults, we move from authority to influence. And so we want to just have that influence. There's a great book. It's called Doing Life with Your Adult Kids by Jim Burns. And the subtitle to that is How to Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out.
Yes, exactly.
And I think for a lot of parents, we need to learn that. And it's really, really hard as they start making decisions and when can I speak into those and when do I just need to let them kind of go and that kind of stuff. So,
and I think we know our kids best. And so when they call and you hear something in their voice, don't just like slough it off. I mean, ask some intentional questions. Something's going on, and they're going to come back to their safe place. And so just be there.
That's great. Okay, well, as we wrap up this conversation then, first of all, Evan, if a young adult's listening to this, how can they get connected into community here at 121?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing is, one, fill out a Connect card when you come to church. If you haven't already, Michelle is probably going to track you down at some point.
I will.
There's a newsletter that goes out every week for the Vine. If you want to get connected to that, reach out to email. My email is evan.sandmann with 2 N's at 121cc.com. You can get on that. You can follow us at the Vine _ YA, young adults, right? So that is our Instagram. And then the other thing is GroupMe. That's where all of our announcements go out. And then there's other ways that we can get you connected that way. The second Thursday of every month, we do a worship and prayer night. And then the fourth Thursday of every month, we have fellowship nights where we go out and do something fun in the community as a body of believers. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I encourage you. God's doing some incredible things in our young adults here. Get involved in the Vine. Parents, this is a great way to maybe help your kids. Hey, this is a cool thing to plug into. You might want to check it out. So,
absolutely
love it. Okay, as we close, I want to read just one piece from that 1 Corinthians 7 I mentioned earlier. He says this: "Only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him." And then he goes on a little bit later. Says, "In whatever condition each was called, let him remain with God." And I think that's a lesson that we can take from this conversation for all of us. Let's just be content and all in on the season of life that we're in. And for young adults especially, we've seen a lot of really cool things. I just want to encourage everybody to continue this conversation because as we do this, as we really press into that season of life we're in, it is living against the grain.